I had 72 hours before he vanished across the border with a year's worth of my money. 72 hours to decide whether I'd let him walk away or burn his entire world to ash. The hospital room smelled like disinfectant and cold sweat, my own. And every time my phone buzzed with another overdue bill notification, my broken ankle throbbed like my body was keeping score of every lie he'd fed me. Everyone said I should forgive him, move on, be the bigger man. That was the one choice I refused to make. Let me take you back to where this nightmare actually started, not with the betrayal itself, but with the moment I made myself vulnerable to it, the moment I trusted completely. I'm a tech guy, or at least I was supposed to be. I graduated with a computer technology certification right as the 2008 financial crisis hit like a wrecking ball through every industry promise ever made to young graduates. All those companies that showed up at our school with scholarship offers and guaranteed positions, they vanished overnight. The career of the future became a graveyard of broken promises. I couldn't afford university. I couldn't afford retraining courses as technology evolved past me. My early 20s became a blur of dead-end jobs, temporary contracts, and that soul-crushing cycle. Work, save, get laid off, burn through savings while unemployed, repeat. I was 28 years old and felt like I'd been treading water my entire adult life, getting nowhere except more exhausted. That's when I snapped. I remember sitting in my apartment one night, staring at my laptop, outdated by 3 years, knowing I couldn't afford the courses to keep my skills current. My father had been a welder before he passed. Good money, stable work, real tangible skills that didn't become obsolete every 18 months. I decided right then, career change. I was going to become a welder. The universe, for once, seemed to agree with me. A week, literally 7 days before I was about to drain my savings for welding school, a government-sponsored training program appeared. Free certification, full coverage. It felt like fate throwing me a lifeline after years of drowning. I finished the welding program in record time. 3 days after certification, I had a job offer. 3 days. After spending months unemployed between tech jobs, this felt like walking through a door into a completely different life. That's where he comes into the story. I'll call him Rat Boss. RB for short. RB ran a small field welding operation, half a dozen guys traveling across Europe doing specialized industrial work. When he interviewed me, he had this energy about him, confident, direct. He looked me in the eye and said, "School taught you the basics. I'll teach you real welding, the kind that matters, the kind that pays." He wasn't lying, not then anyway. The first 6 years were incredible. Brutal, exhausting, but incredible. We worked dawn until the light died, 7 days a week. Sometimes we'd be gone from home for 5-6 weeks straight. We'd roll into some industrial site in Poland, Germany, Czech Republic, covered in road dust and ready to work. The welding was hard, field work always is, but the adventure, the travel, the brotherhood we built, that made everything worth it. I'm talking about the kind of crew where you start as strangers and end up closer than family. We had each other's backs through equipment failures, impossible deadlines, language barriers, and the kind of exhaustion that makes you question every life choice. But we pushed through together every single time. And RB, he was the kind of boss you'd follow into hell if he asked. I remember this one particular month, we just wrapped a massive project. The client was scheduled to pay in 2 weeks, but RB had an emergency expense, personal crisis, drained his business account completely. Payday was coming, and he didn't have the cash to cover our wages. You know what he did? He took out a high-interest personal loan so he could pay us on time. He went into debt rather than ask us to wait 2 weeks. He looked each of us in the eye and said, "You worked for this money. You're getting it. That's non-negotiable." Who does that in this economy, in this world of corporate sociopaths who'd steal your last dollar and call it restructuring? I thought I'd found the rarest thing in the working world, a boss who actually valued his people, a man who understood loyalty. I was so goddamn wrong. Everything changed in year 7. The original crew started leaving. Guys wanted to be home with their families. Marriages were straining. Kids were growing up without fathers around. I understood, but it hurt watching that brotherhood dissolved. RB felt it too. I could see it in how quiet he got during those goodbye dinners. That's when he proposed a new arrangement. He'd work locally, near his home. I'd become foreman of the field crew. He'd recruit and send workers my way, and I'd manage the jobs abroad. It seemed like a natural evolution. I'd proven myself. I knew the work inside and out. Those first few months as foreman went smoothly enough. Jobs completed, clients satisfied, money flowing. But the people working under me, they weren't like the old crew. They weren't there to build something or be part of a team. They were transactional, short-term workers chasing quick cash to pay off debts or pad a resume before finding better work back home. Then the pandemic hit, and I had to sit out work for months. I had savings. Years of living carefully had taught me to always have a reserve, so I weathered it fine. But when work resumed, that's when the wheels truly came off. Nobody decent wanted field work anymore. The labor pool had dried up. So the people RB started sending me, these weren't just unqualified. They were disasters. Functional alcoholics, addicts, men with criminal records and nothing left to lose. Men who saw a job site as a place to steal tools, show up drunk, or start fights. Every job became a nightmare of babysitting adults who couldn't or wouldn't do basic work. I spent more time managing their chaos than actually welding. But I kept the projects moving. I made sure every job got finished, every invoice went through, because that was my responsibility. That was my pride. But the money situation started getting weird. Wages came late. Reimbursements for travel expenses got delayed, then forgotten. RB started doing what I can only call creative accounting. Discrepancies between what workers earned and what actually hit their accounts. Small amounts at first, then larger. I kept detailed records. Every expense, every mile driven, every receipt. It's just how I operated. I didn't think much of it at the time, except that things felt sloppier than before. Then came the night that changed everything. It was 3 a.m. I was supposed to drive the crew back home at sunrise. My phone rang, the kind of ring that jolts you awake with immediate dread. It was our client. One of my workers was arrested, drunk and disorderly in the town center. The police found him passed out near a fountain, aggressive and combative when they tried to move him. He didn't have ID, just his work badge with the company name. So the police called the client. The client called me. I had to get dressed at 3 a.m., drive to the police station, and vouch for this drunk idiot who just humiliated me, the company, and the client. The police lectured me like I was responsible for his personal choices. The client was furious. I stood there, exhausted and mortified, eating abuse from every direction while this drunk idiot sat in a holding cell, sleeping it off. When I finally got everyone home, I was done, completely done. I called RB and said we needed to talk, in person, immediately. We met at a cafe. He looked tired, worn down. He admitted he was having problems with his wife. She co-ran the business finances, and they were fighting about expenditures. Money was tight. Then he dropped the real bomb. He owed me almost a year's worth of travel expense reimbursements.
Let me put that in perspective. I was driving at minimum 2,000 miles monthly. Fuel, tolls, vehicle wear, food, accommodation gaps, and added up to serious money. Money that should have been reimbursed monthly, but kept getting pushed back. "I need you to wait a bit on that money," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "My wife is blocking any major expenditures right now. Just give me some time to sort this out." He also asked me to stay on locally, working for minimum wage, just until he could assemble a better crew. And here's the part that still makes me angry at myself. I agreed. 7 years of working together, 7 years of loyalty. I thought I knew this man. I thought waiting a few months for him to fix his marriage and business problems was reasonable. I trusted him. But I wasn't completely naive. I had one condition.
I need half of what you owe me by the end of September. I've got contractors scheduled to work on my house. I've already paid deposits. This isn't negotiable." He smiled. "That shouldn't be a problem. September is months away." We shook hands. I walked to my car. As I was leaving, he gave me this smile, and something about it made my skin crawl. It was fake, plastic, the smile of a man who'd already decided to screw me over and was just waiting for the right moment. I stared at him, really stared, the kind of look that says, "I'm not playing games anymore." That fake smile melted off his face instantly. He looked away. I drove home with a knot in my stomach that wouldn't unclench. The next few months, I worked locally for minimum wage. Even that paycheck started coming late. A day or two at first, then a week. My instincts were screaming that something was wrong, but I kept hoping I was being paranoid. Early September rolled around, the month his debt payment was due. I confronted him again. We had an agreement. Half the travel expenses by end of month. Are we good? "Absolutely," he said, all confidence. "I've got the cash ready. Don't worry." When we parted that day, he gave me that same fake smile again, and I gave him the look that said, "If you screw me, there will be consequences." That weekend, RB sent me a long message about how he'd finally assembled a decent crew and was heading abroad to meet with a potential client, getting his foot back in the fieldwork door, he called it. Alarm bells exploded in my head. He was leaving right before payment was due. He was going to dodge me. He was going to vanish across borders and avoid the deadline. After everything, after 7 years, after I trusted him with my financial stability, he was going to betray me. I decided right then, if the money doesn't arrive on the due date, I'm filing my resignation. 30 days notice, formal and legal, and I'm done. But here's where fate decided to twist the knife even deeper. When you're that angry, that betrayed, that consumed with rage, you lose focus. Your mind is elsewhere. You make mistakes. I was working on a loading ramp, distracted, furious, replaying every conversation with RB and imagining the confrontation coming. I wasn't paying attention. I slipped. It wasn't a simple twisted ankle. It wasn't a sprain. I completely destroyed my ankle, shattered it. The pain was so immediate and overwhelming, I blacked out for a second. Emergency surgery, 2 weeks minimum in the hospital, 6 months before I could put proper weight on it again. The doctor said I was lucky I didn't lose the foot entirely. This was 1 week before RB's payment was due. Guess what happened to the money? Nothing. Not a single cent arrived. Not the partial debt repayment, not even my regular minimum wage. Complete silence. I was lying in a hospital bed, my leg in a cast, on heavy painkillers that made everything feel distant and surreal. The contractors were scheduled to start work on my house. My mother had emergency access to my accounts. She used my savings to pay them rather than cancel, thinking my sick leave payments would cover everything. They didn't. RB didn't pay me a single cent of sick leave. Nothing. He just stopped communicating, stopped paying, vanished. I ran out of money while I was still in the hospital.
The bank started calling about a final debt installment I owed them. Weekly calls, threatening letters. I was bedridden, crippled, in pain, and watching my financial life collapse in real time. I had to liquidate an investment account to cover the debt and basic living expenses while I recovered. This wasn't just savings. This was an investment that would have generated modest passive income for the rest of my life. Gone. Cashed out at a loss because I had no other option. R.B. didn't just steal money from me. He stole my future. I thought that was the worst of it. I was so devastatingly wrong. Recovery from that kind of injury isn't like the movies. You don't have a montage of physical therapy and then you're walking again. It's months of grinding pain, limited mobility, and the psychological torture of depending on others for basic tasks. I couldn't drive, I couldn't cook properly, couldn't even shower without help. My mother had to move in to take care of me. I was 35 years old and I needed my mother to help me to the bathroom. Every day I'd wake up and for about 3 seconds I'd forget about the injury and the betrayal. Then the pain would hit, physical pain in my ankle, and the deeper, sicker pain of realizing R.B. had abandoned me when I needed help most. The bank calls continued. My mother would answer sometimes, trying to explain I was recovering from surgery. They didn't care. They wanted money, numbers on a screen. That's all I was to them. I started having nightmares, not about the fall, about R.B. Dreams where I'd confront him and he'd just laugh. Dreams where I'd present evidence of what he owed me and everyone would side with him. Dreams where I'd try to speak and no sound would come out. I'd wake up in cold sweats, my ankle throbbing, fury and helplessness churning in my gut. My friends told me to let it go. Focus on healing, they said. The stress isn't good for recovery. One friend even said, maybe he's struggling too. These are hard times for everyone. That one almost ended the friendship right there. Hard times for everyone? I was bedridden, broke. R.B. had stolen a year's worth of expenses, left me without sick leave and vanished, and I was supposed to consider his struggles? But the worst part was the self-doubt. Late at night, when the pain meds wore off and I couldn't sleep, I'd question myself. Had I been a good foreman? Had I pushed too hard for the money? Was I being unreasonable? Then I'd remember that fake smile, the deliberate avoidance, the calculated timing of his trip abroad right before payment was due. No, this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was theft. This was betrayal. This was a man who knew exactly what he was doing. I tried reaching out to him once. A simple message. I'm in the hospital. I need the sick leave payments, please. Read receipt showed he saw it. No response. I called. Voicemail. I left a message explaining I'd had emergency surgery and was unable to work, that I needed the support I was legally entitled to. Nothing. I contacted his wife through the business line. She said, you'll need to discuss this with R.B. directly. And then she hung up. They'd circled the wagons. They knew exactly what they were doing, and they didn't care. That's when the rage calcified into something colder, something more dangerous. Determination. I started going through my records, every document, every receipt, every email and text message from 7 years of working together. I had kept meticulous records as foreman and was part of the job. Payroll discrepancies, unreimbursed expenses, safety violations, tax irregularities. I hadn't been looking for ammunition before. I was doing my job. But now I was building a case. The more I reviewed, the worse it got. R.B. hadn't just screwed me over. He'd been cutting corners and breaking rules for years. I had noticed some of it at the time, but had trusted him to handle the business side properly. That trust was leverage he exploited. There were wage payment irregularities for other workers, there were tax dodges, there were safety shortcuts that could have gotten people killed. There was government sick leave money that he'd collected on behalf of workers, including me, that he'd pocketed instead of distributing. He hadn't just betrayed me, he was a systematic fraud. I couldn't walk, but I could document. I could organize. I could build. My mother would bring me my laptop, worried about how much time I was spending hunched over it. She'd say, "You need to rest." I'd reply, "I am resting. This is rest." It wasn't. It was an obsession, but it was an obsession with purpose. Friends started avoiding the topic. Family members would change the subject when I brought up RB. Everyone wanted me to heal and move forward. No one understood if this was part of my healing, that every document I organized, every violation I cataloged, every piece of evidence I compiled, that was me taking back power. That was me refusing to be a victim. 3 months after my surgery, I could hobble around on crutches. The pain was still intense, but the heavy-duty medications were reduced. My mind was clearer. I made a list of every government agency and regulatory body that had jurisdiction over RB's business: labor inspectors, tax authority, safety regulators, workers' rights advocates. I prepared separate evidence packages for each one, tailored to their specific jurisdiction and concerns. I didn't just throw random documents at them. I organized everything. I highlighted violations. I provided timelines. I made it easy for them to see exactly what RB had done wrong. I drafted a formal complaint letter. It took me 2 days to get the tone right. Not emotional, not vengeful. Clinical, factual, devastating. But I couldn't file yet. I needed to be able to walk into those offices in person, to look caseworkers in the eye, to show them I was serious.
4 months post-surgery, I could walk without crutches. Barely. I was slow. I limped heavily. The pain was constant, but I could move under my own power. One morning, I woke up and looked at the compiled evidence folders on my desk. Months of work, hundreds of documents, irrefutable proof. I got dressed. I put on my best clothes. I loaded everything onto a flash drive and printed backup copies. My mother asked where I was going. "To file some paperwork," I said. She knew. She looked at me with this mixture of worry and pride. "Are you sure about this?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." I drove, badly, painfully, but I drove to the labor inspectorate office. I walked in, still limping, still clearly injured, and asked to file a formal complaint. The caseworker was a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, who probably dealt with frivolous complaints all day. She started with the standard questions, looking bored. Then I handed her the evidence folder. I watched her face change as she went through it, page after page. Her eyes widened. She started mumbling to herself. "Oh my God, he can't. This is... Jesus Christ." She looked up at me. "How long did you work for this man?" 7 years. "And he did this to you?" "He did this to everyone." She closed the folder carefully, like it was explosive. "Sir, what you've documented here, this man has violated approximately half the labor laws in this country. Do you understand what you're handing me?" "Yes. This will destroy his business." I held her gaze. "Good." She nodded slowly. "Give me 3 days to review this properly. We'll be in touch." I filed similar complaints with 3 other agencies that same day. Same evidence, same clinical presentation, same result. Shock, followed by grim determination. I drove home exhausted. My ankle was screaming, but for the first time in months, I felt something other than pain and rage. I felt hope, not for reconciliation, not for compensation, hope that he'd suffer like I'd suffered, hope that he'd lose like I'd lost, hope that justice, real, crushing, unavoidable justice, was finally coming. The government moves slowly in my country. It's frustratingly bureaucratic, but once it moves, it's like watching a glacier, unstoppable and absolutely destructive to anything in its path. The labor inspectorate contacted me first. They wanted additional documentation for specific time periods. They wanted witness contact information for former crew members. They were building a comprehensive case. I provided everything they asked for, every witness, every detail. I was the perfect complainant, organized, articulate, and armed with documentation they usually had to fight to obtain. The caseworker called me personally. "I've been doing this job for 15 years, she said. "I've never seen a complaint this well documented. It's like you built the case we'd normally spend months trying to construct." I was his foreman. Documentation was part of my job. "He's going to claim you fabricated this out of revenge. Everything is verifiable through bank records, tax filings, and witness testimony. Let him try." She was quiet for a moment. "You know, this will destroy him, right? His business, his finances, possibly his family?" I'd thought about this. Late at night, when the pain kept me awake, I'd wrestled with it. Was I doing the right thing? Was I becoming the villain? Then I'd remember he didn't just hurt me. He'd stolen from other workers. He'd pocketed government benefits meant for sick employees. He'd cut safety corners that could have gotten people killed. This wasn't just about my revenge. This was about stopping a predator. "I understand," I told her. "File the case." The tax authority moved next. They flagged discrepancies between what RB reported paying employees and what actually got deposited. They flagged personal expenses filed as business costs. They flagged unreported income. Each agency was building its own case, but together they were creating an inescapable web. There was no angle RB could slip through, no technicality he could exploit, no sob story that would matter. I knew the timeline. Government investigations like this take months, but they always reach a critical mass. There would be preliminary findings, then official notifications, then demands for compliance, then, if he didn't cooperate, consequences. I waited. My ankle healed slowly. Physical therapy was grueling. I'd stand at the parallel bars trying to rebuild strength, and I'd imagine RB's face when the first official letter arrived. That thought got me through the pain more than any medication. 6 months after filing the complaints, the caseworker called. "We're issuing our preliminary findings next week. He'll be notified and given 30 days to respond. I'm legally required to tell you that he may contact you directly. You're not obligated to speak with him." "I won't," I said. "There's something else you should know. The scale of violations we've documented. We're recommending a full audit of his business operations going back 7 years. We're also recommending a license suspension pending compliance." License suspension. He wouldn't be able to operate. No income, no way to pay fines, no way to fix the problem. "When will he be notified?" "Monday morning." That weekend felt surreal. I went about my life, physical therapy, grocery shopping, catching up on shows I'd ignored for months, while knowing that in 72 hours, RB's world would begin to collapse. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt calm, like a debt was finally being settled. Monday came and went. Tuesday, Wednesday. Thursday afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. "You fucking bastard!" RB's voice, raw, desperate, furious. I'd planned for this moment. I'd rehearsed what I'd say. Stay calm, don't engage, don't gloat. "How could you do this to me?" he screamed. "After everything we've been through, after everything I did for you." That last line triggered something cold in me. "Everything you did for me?" My voice came out flat. "You left me in a hospital bed with no income. You stole a year's worth of expenses. You pocketed my sick leave. You betrayed 7 years of loyalty. And you're asking how I could do this to you? I was going to pay you back. I just needed time. You had months. You had every opportunity. You chose to run instead. You've destroyed me," his voice cracked. "They're freezing my accounts. They're suspending my licenses. I can't work. I can't feed my family. You've destroyed me." The old me, the me from a year ago, would have felt guilt,
would have questioned whether I'd gone too far. But I'd spent months in pain, months broke, months watching my carefully built financial security evaporate, months being gaslit and avoided and treated like I didn't matter. "You destroyed yourself," I said quietly. "I just made sure there were consequences." "Fuck you. I'll fight this. I'll prove you fabricated everything." "Good luck with that. Everything's documented. Everything's verifiable. You're not fighting me. You're fighting the government, and they have bank records, tax filings, and testimony of a dozen witnesses." He was crying now. Actual tears, ugly, gasping sobs. "Please, please, just tell them you made a mistake. I'll pay you back everything. I swear. Just make this stop." For a fraction of a second, I almost felt sorry for him. Then I remembered that fake smile, the deliberate avoidance, the calculated betrayal. "You made your choices, and now live with them. Don't contact me again. Any further communication goes through the Labor Inspectorate." I hung up. My hands were shaken, not from fear or guilt, from the sheer intensity of finally holding power in this situation. He called back 6 more times. I blocked the number. He tried to contact me through former crew members. I ignored them. He tried to paint himself as the victim on social media, posting vague messages about betrayal and vindictive former employees. One of the old crew members sent me screenshots, asking if he should respond. "Don't engage," I told him. "Let the legal system handle it." The next phase came faster than I expected. The government doesn't just freeze accounts and suspend licenses. They demand compliance. They set deadlines. They impose penalties for non-compliance. RB had 30 days to provide corrective action plans, repay stolen benefits, and submit to a full audit. He couldn't do any of it. He had no liquidity. His accounts were frozen. His business was suspended. He was trapped in a cage of his own making. I received a notice from the Labor Inspectorate. Preliminary findings confirmed. Case proceeding to formal enforcement. Estimated timeline, 90 to 120 days. 90 to 120 days until his business was formally dissolved, until fines were finalized, until criminal charges were potentially filed. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt hollow, not regretful, hollow.
Like I'd been carrying this massive weight for so long that now, with it lifted, there was just empty space. My ankle had healed enough that I was walking almost normally. I'd started looking for new work, a fresh start, leave this entire chapter behind. But I knew the end game was still coming, the final collapse, the ultimate consequence, and I wanted to see it through. 3 months after the initial notifications, the full enforcement orders came through. I received copies as the primary complainant. The language was bureaucratic, but the implications were nuclear. All business licenses revoked permanently. Bank accounts seized to cover fines and stolen benefit repayments. Personal assets subject to lien to satisfy outstanding debts. Criminal charges recommended for benefit fraud. Mandatory severance payments to all current and recent employees. That last one was the killing blow. RB had to pay severance to workers he'd already let go with money he didn't have. The caseworker called me. He's filed for bankruptcy. Given the circumstances, the government will have priority claim on asset liquidation. You're listed as a creditor for the travel expenses. You'll be able to file a claim in the bankruptcy proceedings. What are the chances I'll recover anything? She hesitated. Realistically, minimal. After fines, penalties, and priority deaths, there won't be much left. Maybe 1 month's sick leave if you're lucky. 1 month. After a year's worth of expenses, after the destroyed investment, after months of suffering, I'd maybe get 1 month's pay. But I wasn't doing this for the money. Not anymore. "That's fine," I said, "as long as he pays for what he did." "Oh, he's paying. His house is being liquidated. He's lost everything. His house, the dream house he'd talked about for years, the house he'd bought after years of saving, the house he'd shown me photos with such pride, gone. I didn't feel triumph. I felt complete, like a chapter closing. The bankruptcy proceedings took another 4 months. I filed my claim. I provided documentation. I waited. During that time, I found new work. Nothing glamorous, welding for a local manufacturing plant, regular hours, decent pay, no travel. It was almost boring compared to the fieldwork adventures of years past, but it was stable, and after everything, I craved stability more than adventure. The bankruptcy court date arrived. I wasn't required to attend, but I wanted to. I needed to see the end with my own eyes. R.B. looked like a ghost of himself, thinner, older, defeated. His wife sat beside him, stone-faced. They didn't look at each other. The proceedings were technical: asset valuations, creditor claims, priority distributions. The judge was matter-of-fact, processing this like the 100th case of the month. When my claim was addressed, R.B.'s lawyer tried to dispute it. Your Honor, the complainant was adequately compensated during his employment tenure. I stood up. Your Honor, I have documentation of every unreimbursed expense over a 14-month period. It's already been verified by the Labor Inspectorate as part of their investigation. The judge reviewed the file. Claim validated. Approved for inclusion. R.B.'s lawyer sat down, defeated. After the government claims and penalties were distributed, there was almost nothing left. I received exactly 1 month's worth of sick leave payment, about 1,500 euros. 1,500, after losing tens of thousands in expenses and investments. But R.B., he lost his business, his house, his savings, his reputation, his future earning potential. As we left the courthouse, I found myself face to face with him in the hallway. His wife had gone ahead. We were alone for the first time since that phone call months ago. He looked at me with empty eyes. I hope you're satisfied. I could have gloated, could have twisted the knife, could have told him he deserved worse. Instead, I said, "You taught me a lot about welding, about field work, about leadership. For that, I'll always be grateful. But you also taught me that loyalty means nothing to some people, that trust is a weapon in the wrong hands. I'm sorry it came to this, but I'm not sorry I held you accountable." He just stared at me. Then he walked away, limping slightly, looking decades older than he was. I never saw him again. The months after was strange. I'd built my entire life around field welding and the crew brotherhood. Now I was working a regular job, coming home every night, living a normal life. People asked if I felt like I'd won, if the revenge was worth it. The truth is complicated. I didn't get my money back. I didn't undo the damage. I didn't magically heal the betrayal wound. But I refused to be a victim. I refused to let him steal from others. I refused to let him face zero consequences. In that sense, yes, it was worth it. Some nights I think about the old crew, the good years, the adventures, the brotherhood. I miss that. But I can't separate those good memories from the knowledge of what R.B. became. Or maybe what he always was, and I just couldn't see it. My ankle still aches when it rains, a permanent reminder. But I'm walking, I'm working, I'm rebuilding. R.B., from what I heard through the grapevine, is working odd jobs, cash under the table, can't get licensed for field work anymore, can't get credit, can't rebuild. He's stuck at the bottom, while I'm slowly climbing back up. That's not justice, not really. Justice would be getting back what was stolen, getting back the life trajectory that was derailed. But it's accountability, and sometimes that's the best you can get. I'm not the hero of this story. I'm not even sure there is a hero. Just two men who made choices,
and those choices had consequences. The difference is, I can live with mine. If this story meant something to you, I'd appreciate if you'd share it with someone who might need to hear it. Hit subscribe if you want more real stories about betrayal, revenge, and the messy reality of holding people accountable. Drop a comment telling me if you think I went too far or not enough. I'm genuinely curious what you'd have done in my position. And hit that bell icon so you never miss when I share the next chapter of human nature at its worst and its most resilient. Because the truth is, we all face betrayal at some point. The question isn't whether you'll get hurt, it's what you'll do when you are. Will you roll over and accept it, or will you stand up even when it costs you everything and demand consequences? I chose consequences, and I'm still paying the price for that choice. But at least I can look myself in the mirror. Thanks for listening. Until the next story.